Have you ever felt like if you told your truth, people would never look at you the same again? Like the thing you've been hiding could shatter everything they think they know about you? What if he told you that for more than 6 decades, you've carried a secret that Usha has haunted me even in my dream? Would you still listen? My name is Margaret Whittaker. I was born and raised in a small rural town called Byfield, tucked away in northern Colorado where everyone knew everyone, and yet no one truly knew what happened behind closed doors. Today, I'm 74 years old. My hands are wrinkled, my hair is silver and always tied into a loose bun, and I move slowly, more from the weight of a past than from age. People look at me and think I'm just another old woman who spent her days tending to flowers, baking pea for the grandkid, and praying before bedtime. But if they only knew what he endured to stay alive, if they knew what he had to do to protect someone he loved more than my own life. This isn't a beautiful story. It's not the kind you read in novel with soft ending and warm conclusion. But I need to tell it. Because some stories shouldn't be forgotten. Some wounds need to be exposed so they never happen again. I was a little girl in the 1960s, a time when everything was harder, when women kept quiet, when children obeyed, and when men ruled their homes like kings, even if they were monsters in disguise. My mother, Evelyn, worked odd job cleaning houses and doing laundry for wealthy family. My father, Thomas Whittaker, worked when he felt like it, drank when he didn't, and controlled the home like our general. He was a man of few words and many fists. As his voice didn't need to be loud, his presence alone made people step aside. Even our neighbor fell silent when he walked down the road. He beat my mother regularly. He remembered her curled on the kitchen floor, shielding her head with her arms. He heard the thud. He saw the bruise. But he never dared to speak. Because back then, that is just how things were. My mother used to say, marriage is for better or worse, and for me, it's been nothing but worse. He became an adult too soon. By the time he was 9, he was cooking full meal, cleaning the entire house, and caring for my baby sister, Lillian. She had been born weak, with soft lung and a fragile body. Our mother was too exhausted to hold her, so he did it. He changed her first diaper. He soothed her when she cried at night. He made himself a promise no one would ever hurt my little sister. But he broke that promise. We lived in a small wooden house near a creek that ran behind the town. It was still built with brick, just thin wood that rattled when the wind howled. Inside, we had 3 rooms, a kitchen, my parents' bedroom, and the small back room where Lillian and he slept. My mother was a slim woman, her face worn and tired, always wearing faded floral dress and old sandal. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it lit up the whole house. Lillian was the opposite, lively, curious, always chattering, always dreaming. She made up stories about castles and queens and dragons we could defeat together. He loved listening to her tales, because in her world, we were free. But as soon as the screen door creaked open and we heard of Father's heavy boots on the porch, that world collapsed. We froze. The food had to be hot. Ashi's glass full. If he came on drunk, he just cursed at us. But if he was sober, that was worse. Because sober, he used his sang. And we accepted it. Because what else could we do? He was 12 when he noticed Lillian changing. She started having nightmares. She'd wake up crying, and when he asked her what was wrong, she'd just hug me and say, "He can't tell you." At first, he thought it was fear of Dad, who wouldn't be afraid of him, but there was something different about this fear. It wasn't general, it was specific. Targeted. She started eating when he came home. She'd sit in corner, silent, her eyes wide like a wounded bird. One night, he heard footsteps. My father never walked around that night. On se was out, he snored like a bear. But that night, he was awake. He tiptoed into the hallway. The light in my parents' room was on. And then, he saw it. My father, kneeling next to the bed. My sister, curled into herself, eyes wide in terror. My mother, sitting in the corner, hugging her own body, crying without a sound. That image never left me. That night, he held Lilian in my arms until she fell asleep. He didn't sleep. He listened to every creak, every breeze, and he knew something had to change. We couldn't stay. But where would we go? How could he convince my mother, who barely had the strength to stand? In the following days, he watched closely. He saw how Mom flinched when Dad touched Lilian, how she clenched her jaw when he called Lilian over. She knew. She always knew. But she stayed. One night, while Mom was washing dish, he said softly, "We have to leave." She stopped scrubbing, stared at the plate in her hand. "Do you know what he has done?" He asked. She shut her eyes. "He can't. Where would we go?" "Anywhere is better than here." She stood silent, then finally looked at me, and for the first time, he saw fear in my mother's eyes. Not fear of him, fear of doing something. Fear of changing our destiny. That night, without him noticing, we began planning our escape. Some things destroy you slowly, quietly, not with scream, but with silence. And silence can be deafening. That night, he changed. He knew my life would never be like other girls. But seeing my sister in that state, it felt like someone had wrapped terre around my chest and never let go. Lilian was my sunshine, the one who could make mud be magical. She made even the worst days tolerable. But after that night, she stopped logging. She stopped talking. She stopped being a child. She didn't run to the yard at sunrise anymore. She stayed inside. She avoided thoughts. And when her father was near, she shrank into herself. My mother saw it. You know she did. She followed Lilian with her eyes, her hand trembling when Dad called her over. But she said nothing. He wanted to scream. How could a mother allow this? But he also knew why. Because she was just afraid. My father didn't just it. He punished. He dominated. He left bruises that lasted weeks. And he knew no one would ever challenge him. He still tried to make Lilian play. He lay out her dolls. But one day she looked at me and said, "You don't want to play." "Why not? You always loved playing." "I'm not a kid anymore." She was only 7, and that monster had already stolen everything from her. That night, he held her hand while she cried in her sleep. And he whispered, "I'll save you, Lilian." He swore. She squeezed my hand in her sleep. And that is when he knew we couldn't wait another day. If you made it this far, comment below, silence no longer protect me. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me. Because this story, my story, need to be heard. Lilian was my treasure, my reason to keep going. From the moment she was born, he swore he'd protect her from everything. But he didn't know that protecting someone in a house like ours was nearly impossible. After those first nightmares, something in her changed. She had always been full of stories and laughter, spinning imaginary tales with princesses made of sunlight and castles built from pincon. But now, she barely spoke. She sat alone in corner, arms around her knees, staring off into space. She stopped playing with her dolls. She stopped asking questions. She no longer wanted to be touched, not even by me. Mom noticed too. She never said it out loud, but he saw the way her hand trembled when Dad walked by. The way she winced when Lilian flinched. She knew. We all knew. But no one said a word. The first time he truly understood what was happening was the night he walked to the sound of footsteps again. It was past midnight. Lilian and he usually fell asleep early, but he was restless. There was a heaviness in the air when he had learned to recognize the kind that came before something terrible. He heard my father's boots across the wooden floor. He never woke up at night, unless he had a reason. He slid out of bed quietly, tiptoed to the hallway. The light from my parents' room was on, and then he saw him, kneeling beside Lilian. She was curled on the bed, frozen, her eyes wide open. Mom sat on the edge of the room, hugging her own shoulder, tears rolling down her face, but not a sound came out. She wasn't asleep. She was awake. And do nothing. He couldn't scream. He couldn't move. He just stared. And something inside me broke. When he left, he went to Lilian. She was still shaking. He pulled her close, whispering, "It's okay. I'm here." But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. He didn't sleep that night. He just held her. And, vowed again, "We have to get out." The next morning, he watched Dada et Ate in silence. His jaw clenched. His eyes sharp. He knew we were watching him. He liked it. Mom served him coffee without looking him in the eye. Lilian sat in silence, barely touching her eggs. He waited until he left for work, then turned to Mom. "We need to go." She didn't answer. "Mom," he said, "you know what he has done." She stared at the floor. "He can't," she whispered. Et elle qui lui est. He didn't know if that was true, but he knew staying would be worse. So he kept pushing. That week, Mom began eating qu'on under the mat. When she cleaned for the neighbor, she kept a few dollars tucked inside her shoe. He started doing the same. If he found change in Dad's pocket while doing laundry, he kept it. It wasn't much, but it was something. We didn't have a plan yet, but we had intention. And that alone was new. Then one Sunday evening, everything unraveled. Dad was drunk, like always. He slumped in his chair, his belt undone, staring into nothing. But his eyes weren't glazed. They were focused. Alert. He was watching us. "You two look different," he mumbled. Mom froze. He kept my eyes on the floor. "You've been sneaking around?" he barked. "What are you eating?" No one answered. He slammed his glass on the table. "Answer-me." Mom tried to look. "It's nothing. We're just tired." He stood suddenly. The chair screeched backward. Lilian started crying. But he didn't come toward us. He just stared. Then turned and went outside. That night, he knew we were out of time. He whispered to Mom, "We leave tomorrow." She nodded. At dawn, we packed what little we had. Some bread, a blanket, or hidden coin. We planned to go to Fort Collins. It was a few towns away, and we had a distant cousin there who might help. But Dad didn't go to work that morning. He sat on the porch all day, smoking, watching, waiting. We were trapped. That evening, a darkness fell. He said, "We're going to bed early." That wasn't a request. It was a warning. Mom and he exchanged a glance. She nodded. We understood. When he went to the bathroom, she spilled a kettle of water on the floor, on purpose. He yelled. And that was the moment. She turned to me and screamed, "Run!" He grabbed Lilian's and bolted through the back door. Cold wind hit my face. Our feet pounded the earth. He heard Dad shooting behind us, chair falling, glass breaking. We ran. Down the road. Through the trees. Across the creek. We didn't stop. Lilian stumbled. He pulled her up. We kept going. The air cut our skin like knife. Our lamp burned. But we ran. Because stopping meant death. We didn't look back. We didn't speak. We just ran. That was the night we left everything. And began everything new. My mother wasn't a weak woman. She was a worn-down woman. A woman who had been defeated one key battle at a time over years of surviving in a war no one else could see. Her shoulder had slumped long before her age caught up with her. Not because of time, but because of fear. Because of exhaustion. Because she'd spent her whole life trying not to be broken while living with a man who did nothing but break things. When she finally said, "We're leaving," he knew she was giving all the strength she had left. We didn't have a plan. We didn't have a destination. But we had intention. And that was more than we ever had before. Lilian, she was already disappearing. She barely spoke. When Someon knocked at the door, she ran to the back of the house. If she heard boots on gravel, her whole body froze. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She just existed. Like a tiny shadow, fading from view. He tried everything to bring her back. He placed her dolls in a circle like we used to play. He baked the sweet cornbread she loved. He even found her favorite book and read it out loud in silly voices. Nothing worked. Every time he touched her arm, she flinched. Every time he said her name, she looked past me. My mother watched all this with a face that never changed. But her eyes, they were always wet. She didn't say it, but knew she felt the same guilty deed. The same helplessness. After our failed escape, when we realized my father was watching us staying home, sitting on the porch, observing our every move, we knew we were in more danger than ever. He knew. He hadn't confronted us, but his eyes said everything. One night, he heard him talking to a neighbor outside. Those women think they can sneak around behind my back, he said. If they try to leave, he'll make so they regret it. He was in the kitchen, washing dish. He dropped the plate he was holding. My mother didn't even react. She just kept drying her hands slowly. That night, she whispered to me, "We need to move fast." Et so to us. We changed the tactic. Instead of saving corn under the mat, she started hiding them inside a false bottom in her sewing kit. He began stealing penny from the grocery change when he ran errand. We were gathering the tiniest of funds, but it felt like building a ladder out of toothpicks. Each coin felt like hope, but also risk. Because if he cooked to us, we'd be done. Then it happened. One Thursday, Lillian didn't come home from school. We panicked. He ran down the road, searching the alley. My mother called every neighbor. 2 hours later, we found her sitting alone behind the general store, knees scraped, dress torn. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared at us. That night, he held her in my lap while she shook violently. She whispered, "Don't let him take me again." It was the first time she'd said anything that direct. He looked at my mother. Tears in her eyes. But still, silence. He wanted to scream at her. "Why don't you say something? Why didn't you stop him?" But he knew. She was a prisoner too. Just like us. She had nowhere to go. No family. No money. And more than anything, no belief that the world outside was better than the one inside. My father had convinced her of that. Of course he had. It's what abused do. They don't just control your body, they take your soul, your self-worth, your map of the world. He had drawn a map with only one route, is. And we worked it for years. But now we were preparing to draw our own. Even if it was messy. Even if it led into the unknown. Then came the moment that changed everything. One Saturday morning, my father left for work later than usual. He stood by the door, looking around slowly, like he was memorizing everything. Then he left, his boots crunching the gravel and walked away. We didn't waste a second. Mom pulled the mat off the bed and grabbed the hidden money. He packed a small bag, 2 sets of cloth, some bread, a water bottle. Lillian didn't ask questions. She just did what we told her. We headed to the house of a woman named Mrs. Harper. She had been my mother's client for years, a stern but kind widow who always looked at us with pity. We didn't know what we were going to say. We didn't know if she'd help. But we had to try. We knocked. She opened the door. Her face tightened when she saw us, but she didn't ask questions. She just let us in. That night, we stayed in her back room. 3 women on a cold floor, hearts racing. My father never showed up, but he knew he would, and we needed to leave before he did. Mom told me we'll go to the next county. He knows someone there. We can get new names. Start over. He was only 15, but he understood. That night, he stood by the window. Outside, the wind howled like it used to back home. But this time, it didn't scare me, because we had done it. We had run. Not far, not fast, but enough to begin again. We stayed with Mrs. Harper for 3 days. She gave us warm meal, all clothed from her attic, and a single mat to share in her back room. But her face changed with each sunrise. On the 4th day, as she served us coffee in chipped porcelain mug, she sat down heavily and said, "Margaret, I can't keep you here." Her voice wasn't cold, just tired. He understood. We were a burden she couldn't afford to carry. We thanked her quietly, packed the little we had, and left before the sun touched the porch. We walked 4 hours with no destination. Mom carried the heavy bag, he held Lilian in hand. My sister hadn't said a word since the night at the general store. Her silence screamed louder than any cry they ever heard. She flinched at birth, jumped at Caron. The trauma had devoured the child she was. We ended up in a nearby town called Milaven, a sleepy place 2 hours south of Byfield. The streets were clear, the homes painted in faded pastel color, and an old church stood at the heart of it all, its white cross towering like a watchful eye. It was there my mother made a decision that would change the course of our lives once again. She approached the pastor. His name was Reverend Paul Westbrook, a tall man with thick glass and a smooth voice that made people lean in when he spoke. He smiled at us, offered prayer, and said, "No one is beyond redemption." He promised help, shelter, discretion. We thought we'd been saved. He let us sleep in a room behind the church for a few days, gave us food, and even helped my mother find work cleaning the sanctuary. Lilian and he were enrolled in the small Christian school the church funded. At first, he felt relief. The air was lighter. The sound of my father's boots was gone. But soon, he realized we hadn't escaped control. We had just exchanged one master for another. Reverend Westbrook was kind in public, but behind closed doors, he had a way of looking at people that made their skin crawl. Especially girls. Et they asked strange questions during prayer session. Et they lungeait tout long when blessing sommet on his forehead. Et called us his girls. At school, we were told to be pure in speech, pure in thoughts, pure in dress. Our skirts were measured. Our hair kept long. Our voices soft. They told us women were created to serve, to support, to obey. He watched Lilian shrink even more under that message. She had already lost her voice, but now they were burying her spirit under a layer of doctrine. One Sunday, Reverend Westbrook approached me during cleanup. "You're doing good work, Margaret," he said, placing his hand on my shoulder. "You've been chosen for a reason. Obedience is a gift from the Lord." He smiled weakly and nodded. Inside, he screamed. He recognized the pattern, the tone, the control masked a kindness, but he couldn't speak up. Not here, not in the house of God, because they had something my father never needed, faith a weapon. In Byfield, we were trapped by fist. In Milaven, we were trapped by Bible. The church became our world. The people whispered about my mother, a broken woman with a troubled past. They smiled, but always from a distance. We were grateful, but not free. One afternoon, he heard Lilian crying in the chapel. He found her sitting behind the pews, knees to her chest. "What is wrong?" He asked. She whispered, "He don't like when he hug me." My blood froze. Who? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He walked out of that church with her hand in mine and told my mother we were leaving. Again. "But we have nowhere else to go," she said. "We didn't have anywhere before it there," he said. That night, he went to Reverend Westbrook and thanked him for his kindness. He placed a hand on my head and said, "The Lord watch over you, child." He smiled, but he never stepped into that church again. We found a small room for rent above a mechanic shop. The owner was a key man who didn't ask questions. My mother worked 2 jobs, one at a diner and another cleaning motel rooms. He babysat Lilian when he wasn't at school. For the first time, we were on our own. Poor, unstable, but free. Almost. Because freedom doesn't come all at once. Especially not for girls who've been taught that silence is holy, that obedience is survival. Lilian still jumped at shadow. Still walked screaming. Still at being touched. He started reading books about trauma from the local library. The librarian, a woman named Deborah, gave me a battered copy of a psychology book. This won't fix you, she said, but it'll help you understand that what you feel is real. He read that book cover to cover. And he cried, because finally, he had word for everything he déburied. We weren't sinful. We weren't cursed. We were wounded. And wound could heal. But only if they were sin. That was when he realized the church hadn't saved us. It had silenced us with pretty word. But silence. Silence had almost killed my sister. So he promised myself never again. The years that followed weren't the kind you see in movies. There was no sudden triumph, no dramatic rescue. Just time. Heavy, slow, complicated time. We drifted from one rented room to another, often sharing mattress, sometimes eating only cracker and peanut butter for days. But we were surviving. Mom became tiny, her grey by the year. Her on scaloused from housework, began to tremble slightly, especially in the morning. But she smiled more. There was a lightness in her eyes he hadn't seen in years, not joy, but absence of terror. That was enough. Lilian tug. She remained somewhere else. Her body grew, but her spirit stayed behind. She barely spoke in school. She didn't make friends. She flinched when my teacher came too close. She had closed doors. Once, he caught her standing in the mirror, scratching her own arm till it bled. He grabbed her wrist and shouted, "Why are you doing this?" She whispered, "Because he can't scream." That broke me. We tried therapy. There was a state program for trauma victims. But every time Lilian entered the room, she froze. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't look at the counselor. After 3 sessions, she refused to go back. She said, "They want me to talk. I don't have word for it." He understood. He was carrying my own silence, too. For years, he pushed everything down. Focused on being her protector, her voice, her buffer from the world. But it came at a cost. He lost himself. He didn't that. Didn't go to prom. Didn't go to college. He got accepted to a small university nearby. He got a job instead, first at a grocery store, then a receptionist at a dentist's office. He became reliable, predictable, invisible, because invisibility felt safe. When he turned 21, a coworker named Lance asked me out. He was sweet, respectful, funny in a key way. He said yes. We went to a dinner. He talked about baseball and jazz and how his mother used to burn pancake every Sunday. He nodded and smiled. But inside, he was ice. When he reached across the table to touch my hand, he flashed. He pulled back. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's not you," he whispered. He don't know how to do this." He nodded. "You don't have to explain." But he wanted to. He wanted to scream. My father touched my sister. My mother watched in silence. He never known what it means to be held without fear. But he said nothing. We dated for 3 months. He was patient, gentle, kind. But he couldn't give him what he needed. So he let him go. After that, he stopped trying. He watched Lilian grow into a young woman, still trapped in the body of that little girl from Byfield. She didn't that at her. She barely finished high school. She started working at a local bookstore, where the owner let her work in the back room sorting inventory. She liked it. It was quiet. No one touched her. Once, he asked her, "Do you ever think about reporting Dad?" She looked at me for a long time, then said, "What would it change?" That question haunted me. What would it change? He was probably still in Byfield, still drinking, still preaching at that tiny church where no one asked questions. He had never faced consequences. He had erased US like chalk on a blackboard. And yet, he didn't have the strength to go back and make noise. Not yet. When he turned 25, Mom got sick. It started with fatigue, then chest pain. Doctor said it was a disease. Too much stress. Too many years of living in fear. She needed medication, rest, low sodium. She ignored it all. Don't waste money on it, she said. Use it for your sister. But he didn't listen. He worked extra hours. Took out a small loan. Booked her medicine. Took her to appointment. He did everything right. But sometimes, doing everything right isn't enough. She died one morning while folding laundry. Collapsed beside the bed, a basket of clean towel beneath her. Lilian found her. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just sat beside her, holding her hand, for 3 hours till he came home. He remembered running through the door, seeing them there. My mother's eyes open, but gone. Lilian's face blank, whispering, she just wanted peace. We buried her with a small service. No flowers, no guest, just us. That night, Lilian said, I think she carried all her pain. He nodded. She never healed, she added. And neither have we. He couldn't argue. Grief didn't come like a storm. It came like fog. Slow, suffocating, relenting. Everywhere he turned, she was there. In the way he folded towel. In the smell of her shampoo. In the silence of the house. But grief has a strange gift. It wakes you up. A few months later, he woke one morning and realized he didn't want to just survive anymore. He wanted to live. Not just for me. For Lilian. And for Mom. Because Simeon had to carry us forward. It was during one of those grey years after Mom passed, after Lilian stopped speaking again, that he made a decision that surprised even me. He wanted a child. Not because he was in love. Not because he believed in the fairy tale of family. But because he wanted to rewrite the story. To create something that wasn't built on fear. He didn't have a partner. He wasn't dating. But there were options. Fertility clinic. Sperm donor. Adoption. He researched everything. At first, he kept it secret. Lilian wouldn't understand. She was still recovering. Still folding into herself every night like she was trying to disappear. But something inside me was growing louder. A voice he hadn't heard in years. He wanted to nurture Simeon without shame. To hold Simeon without flinching. To prove to myself that love didn't have to come rapid in pain. After months of appointment, screening, and counseling, he became pregnant via insemination. When he told Lilian, she stared at me like he'd said he was moving to Mars. Why would you bring Simeon into this world? She whispered. Because maybe they want to carry what we did. She didn't say anything after that. My pregnancy was rogue. Nausea, back pain, fatigue. But every ache felt like purpose. He talked to my belly every night. Sans lullaby. Read poetry. He told my doctor about Grand-Mère. About Byfield. About pain, yes, but also survival. And strength. When she kicked for the first time, he cried for an hour. Not from pain. From wonder. He had lived a life where my body had only been a seat of fear, of control. But now, it was building something new. In a mother Emily Grace. She came into the world on a stormy night in April. The nurse said, she's tiny, but she's fierce. When they placed her in my arms, he expected fear. But all he felt was warmth. Lilian didn't come to the hospital. She said she couldn't. But the day we came home, she was there. She looked at Emily, held her for a moment, and whispered, don't let the world hurt her. He promised he wouldn't. The next few years were a blur of diapé, lullaby, and late-night feeding. He worked part-time from home, answering phone for a local company. Lilian helped when she could. But mostly, she watched Emily from a distance. She loved her. He could see that. But she couldn't be close. Trauma does that. It teaches you that even beauty can be dangerous. He tried to create a home fille with softness. We had a rule, no yelling. We used timer instead of punishment. We danced in the kitchen. We prayed every night, not to a God of fire and fear, but to a God who listened, who helped, who forgave. Emily thrived. She was curious, bold, tender. She asked questions like, why do flowers sleep at night? And if it tells the moon a secret, will it tell the star? She reminded me that not everything was broken. But the fear never left me. Every time she left for school, my stomach twisted. When she made a new friend, he grillait the parents. When a math teacher called, my heart raced. He became obsessed with safety. Look, camera, background check. Lilian said, you're building a fortress. He said, you have to. Because he couldn't let what happened to us happen to her. One night, Emily came into my room crying. He had a nightmare, she said. He pulled her into bed and held her close. What happened in the dream? She whispered, a man came to take me, and you couldn't stop him. He held her tighter. I'll always stop him, he said. But inside, he was crumbling. Because he knew dreams were born from whisper echo passed down through blood, through silence, through things we never say but always feel. He didn't want Emily to carry her ghosts. So he started therapy again. Real therapy. Weekly session with a woman named Dr. Ramirez, who specialized in generational trauma. At first, he talked about my father, then about the church, then about Lilian, then about Emily. He cried in every session, but he kept going, because he couldn't let silence raise my child. Emily deserved a mother who didn't flinch, who didn't eat, who didn't crumble at the sound of boots on gravel. One day, Dr. Ramirez asked, do you believe your doctor will suffer what you did? He said, no, and for the first time, he believed it. That night, he took Emily into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, you are safe. She smiled and said, you know. And in that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in over 30 years. Hope. Emily was see when she asked me, Mom, why doesn't he want Lilian's smiling picture? He paused. We were at the park, sitting on a bench as she licked chocolate ice cream from a Faisait. The sun had dipped behind the trees, casting golden light across the grass. She just doesn't like camera, he said. It was Sally. But how do you explain to a child that some people have lived through things that make smiles feel like betrayal? Lilian had grown more distant as the years passed. She still lived with us. Still folded Emily's cloth neatly. Still left sticky, not reminding me to buy milk. But she rarely spoke. Rarely looked me in the eyes. He worried for her. He worried what would happen if she ever moved out, if she'd vanish into herself and never come back. One night, he found her in the bathtub, fully clothed, staring at the water. Are you okay? He asked. She whispered, he can't feel anything. He helped her out, wrapped her in a towel, and held her for an hour on the bathroom floor. That night, he told her something he hadn't said in decades. He saw it, too. He saw what he did to you. He was there. Her body stiffened. I'm sorry he didn't speak. He was a coward. She didn't respond, but she didn't pull away. The next morning, she made pancake. For the first time in years. It wasn't a miracle, but it was something. Later that week, he got a letter in the mail. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Your father is dying. If you want to see him, come soon. Byfield Nursing Home. He stared at the word for a long time. My hand trembled. He hadn't said his name in decades. He was still alive? He thought he'd drank himself 2 days years ago. Lilian saw the letter. She didn't say a word. That night, after Emily went to bed, he asked her, do you want to go back? She looked dissolute, bitter sound. Back to what? A ghost in a bed. You don't want anything from him, he said. But maybe need something, she replied. He understood. We didn't want closure. We wanted confirmation. That he was real. That we survived him. The next morning, we left Emily with a neighbor and drove the 3 hours to Byfield. The town hadn't changed. Some cracked sidewalks. Some gas station on Main Street. Some church with peeling paint. The nursing home was small, care, with the smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetable. A nurse led us to a room at the end of the hall. And there he was, the man who haunted our dream, whose had shaped our childhood into nightmares. He was small now, shriveled, eyes cloudy with age. He didn't recognize us. Hello, he said. He blinked. Are you my nurse? No, he said. We're your doctor. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Shame. Or maybe just confusion. Lilian stood beside me, silent. He looked at her and said, You look like your mother. Lilian turned and walked out. He stayed. He don't know why. Maybe he needed to see the monster unmasked. He cooked, reached for water. He was a bad father. He said, I've detested everything. He stared at him. You were a predator. He flinched. Silence filled the room. Finally, he said, God forgive. He shook my head. God might. He don't. And then he left. We didn't stop at the church. Didn't visit the whole house. We drove home in silence. That night, he sat with Emily, brushing her hair. She asked, Where did you go? To say goodbye to someone he used to be afraid of. She looked up. Are you still afraid? He smiled. No, because he wasn't. For the first time in my life, he wasn't afraid of him. Or of the past. Or even of the future. Lilian hugged me before bed. I'm proud of you, she said. He held her tight. I'm proud of us. We had made it. Not untouched. Not all. But no longer prisonnier. Returning from Byfield was like waking up from a dream you never wanted to have been someone needed. The road felt different. The air smelled sweeter. Or maybe he had simply changed. Something cracked open in me that day. Something gall. Something buried so deep he thought it had become part of my bones. For the first time, he didn't carry shame when he spoke about the past. He carried truth. And with truth came waked, but not the suffocating kind. The kind that groomed you. He began writing. At first, it was just scrap of paper. Not memory. Sentence like, it smelled like bourbon and fear. Or he should have screamed Loudé. Then he booked a journal. Then another. Before long, he had over a dozen, each filled with pain, rage, guilt, question. But also with strength. He started attending a survivor support group in town. It was held every Thursday in the basement of a community center. The first time he spoke, my voice cracked. My name is Margaret. He was abused by my father. My sister too. And then he cried. But no one looked away. No one pitied me. They nodded. They understood. In that room, he wasn't alone. He met women who had been silent for 40, 50 years. Women who had family, carré, lives busty carrier ghosts in terre. One woman, June, said, We are all haunted. The question is whether we let the ghosts live in our bed or lock them in the attic. That stuck with me. At home, Emily was blooming. She had started drawing. Every surface became her canvas, walls, floor, her own arms. One day she drew a picture of her family, me, her, Lilian, and a large black scribble behind us. What is that? He asked. She said, That is the bad man you fucked. He didn't correct her. She was right. Even if she never met him, it was part of her story. But he didn't define it. Emily gave me the picture and said, You're my hero. He cried in the kitchen for an hour. Lilian started coming to the support group with me. She didn't speak, but she listened. One night, after a session, she said, I think he want to talk to someone. Like, really talk. So he introduced her to Dr. Ramirez, and for the first time in her life, she began to use words for the pain. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks. She décancelled session, disappeared for hours, but she always came back. He began volunteering at the center, helping other women write their stories, facilitating creative workshops, teaching them to bleed ink instead of tears. He spoke at church, at schools, at shelter. Some people applauded. Others looked uncomfortable. One pastor pulled me aside and said, "Must we have such dirty laundry?" He said, "It's not dirty. It's sacred. Because truth is sacred. Pain is sacred. And silence is violence." Emily on asked, "Will you have to go through something like you did to be strong?" He held her face in mine and said, "No, strength isn't what happens after pain. Strength is choosing love even when you've seen it." She smiled. That is what he wanted to be. Love. She already was. Lilian began painting. Small watercolor at first, flowers, birds, abstract swirl. Then portrait. One day, she showed me a canvas. It was US. Me, her, and Emily. Our faces were soft, our eyes wide. Behind US, a wall of fire. He wanted to show what we walked through, she said. But the fire didn't burn US. It almost did. But it didn't. At night, he still had nightmares. Some wound never fully close. But now, when he woke up, he didn't feel alone. He'd make tea, read a psalm, write in my journal, and return to bed knowing he had done the hardest thing. He had survived, and then chosen to live. That is a different kind of miracle. He was 59 the first time he stood in front of a crowd and told the truth without trembling. It was a local women's conference hosted in a small church gymnasium, filled with fold-out chairs, plastic flowers, and stale coffee. The kind of place that ons would have made me shrink into myself. The kind of space where the word forgive and forget had been used like knife. But this time, he held the mic with steady hand. He wore a navy blue blouse, loose slack, and a silver necklace Emily had made in her class. On my wrist, a bracelet engraved with the word enough. He began like this: "My name is Margaret Whittaker. He was abused by my father for most of my childhood. My sister too. We were silenced by fear, by religion, by shame. But today, I am not here a victim. I am here a woman who lived, who chose a link, who found her voice." The room went still. Some women wept. Others just stared, their hands clenched in their laps. He spoke for 30 minutes. He shared the horror, the silence, the escape, the rebuilding, the love he found in my doctor, the strength he found in my sister. Afterward, a woman approached me. She was in her 70s. She whispered, "Me too." He never told anyone. He held her hand and said, "You just did." That moment changed something in me. For decades, he had spoken in shadow, in therapy rooms, in closed circle, whispering. But that day, he realized he didn't have to whisper anymore. He didn't owe anyone my silence. Not the church, not the family name, not the memory of a man who tried to erase me. He began writing more publicly. Essay, article, eventually a memoir. He titled it Doctor of the Fire, a story of burning and becoming. It wasn't a bestseller, but it made it into the hands of women who needed it. Women like me, women like Lilian. Lilian began hosting painting class for survivors. She'd always been quiet, but when she painted, she spoke in color. One of her students, a teenager named Riley, told me Miss Whittaker saved my life. He told her she saved mine too. Emily grew into a teenager with a heart made of sunbeam and fire. She called out injustice in school, defended kids who were bullied, organized food drive. But one day, she came home crying. Someone said you're not a real Christian because you talk about hard things. He sat her down and said, "Faith isn't about pretending things are perfect. It's about standing in the truth even when it hurt." She nodded. That night, she wrote a poem titled My Bouleversant. It ended with the line, "They yelled pain, but never dropped me." He cried. Of course he did. He used 2 apologies for existing. Apologies for taking up space, for crying too loudly, for saying no. for being too broken. Now, he said thank you. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for trying. Thank you for refusing to stay small. Their worst moment of do. Like the night he received an anonymous letter in the mail. No return address. Just forward, let the dead rest. He burned it in the sink. Because silence had been the coffin of too many little girls. And he wouldn't bury my story for anyone. Not anymore. On my 60th birthday, Emily threw me a party in the park. Lillian painted a portrait of me holding a candle. It was titled Berry of Light. At the end of the day, Emily handed me a scrapbook filled with letters from women he never met. Each one began with because of you, he wept till he couldn't breathe. Not from pain. From how? Because he never thought my life would mean anything beyond survival. But it did. And that realization, it was freedom. I am 83 years old now. My en tremble when I pourti. My knees creak like all wood floor. My vision fade more quickly in the evening. And yet, I have never seen more clearly. People often ask me, how did you survive? And I tell them the truth, he didn't survive because he was brave. He survived because he was loved. Sometimes by other. Sometimes by myself. Sometimes just by God when he had nothing else to hold on to. For years, he walked through life like a ghost. Avoiding mirror. Avoiding birthday. Avoiding anything that reminded me he was real. Because real people bleed. Real people are vulnerable. And for a long time, he thought being invisible was the only way to stay safe. But safety is not the same as peace. And peace comes only when you stop eating. When he look back now, he don't just see pain. He sees a girl who ran barefoot through the fields of Byfield. He sees a teenager who cried herself to sleep but never stopped dreaming. He sees a woman who gave birth to light when all she had known was darkness. He sees Margaret. Me. Fully. Finally. He remembered the first time he allowed himself to log again. He was at the beach with Emily. She was 10, chasing seagull, her curl dancing like wildfire. He tripped on a piece of driftwood and fell flat in the sand. And instead of crying, he looked like a child. Looked until people stared. Looked until he couldn't breathe. Emily ran to me and said, "You're silly, Mama." But in that moment, he wasn't silly. He was reborn. Sometimes people assume that healing look like perfection. It doesn't. Healing look like telling the truth at a dinner table and not flinching. It look like holding your grand-doctor and not projecting your fear onto her. It look like singing in church and believing every word. It look like opening the windows even when the windows. It look like planting flowers on grave, not out of guilt, but out of grace. There was a day, not long ago, when a young woman knocked on my door. She said, "My counselor told me you might understand." She had a bruised wrist, a haunted look. He made UST. We sat in silence. And then he said the word no one had ever said to me when he was 16. "I believe you, Amir. You're not alone." And she cried in my arms like he said in Lillian's. The cycle didn't end with punishment. It ended with presence. I'm not famous. I'm not rich. But I am free. And that is more than enough. Sometimes I sit on my porch with Lillian, now gray, sticky, but glowing. We speak less now. But when we look at each other, it's like speaking to a twin soul. We made it. Not without scar, but with strength. And Emily, she's grown. A counselor now. A mother. She named her Dr. Grace. Because that is what saved us all. He once thought my story was a tragedy. But now, he know it was a resurrection. A journey from ashes to breeze. From silence to song. From fear to love. And if you've made it this far, dear soul reading or listening, I want you to remember this. You don't have to carry what was never yours. You don't have to bleed just because someone else made you believe you deserved it. You don't have to be quiet to be safe. Speak. Live. Log. Cry. Be. Because you are worthy. You are whole, even in your brokenness. And you are never, ever alone. If my voice Asha has reached you, if my life Asha has brushed against you even for a moment, then he asks you to leave a sign that you were here. Command his word, he got to the end because he believed in healing. Leave your footprint. Let others see that they are not walking in the dark by themselves. And if this story touched you, if Margaret's journey awakened something inside you, then like, subscribe, and share this video. Not for number, but for voices. Let's flood this world with truth. Let's burn every lie that ever told a little girl she had to stay small. Because we are not small. We are survivor. We are storyteller. We are light. Thank you for walking with me. Now, go light someone else's path.